Hey Ash, how are you, mate?
Ash, good to be here. Very excited to have a little chat and see where we go.
Good. Hopefully our voices are different enough that people won't get confused, Ash, because that could be quite entertaining. I could look like the smart one. Yeah, that's brilliant. I'll be changed. So we talked about this off air. I mean, there's so many different directions that we could go with this conversation. Thank you for coming on, obviously. I wanted to get you here because of your experience and because of the different type of work you've done, because we've got quite similar backgrounds. You know, spent a lot of time in tennis, working with players. You've probably focused a little bit more on the kind of cutting edge performance elite side. I've just kicked newbies around the court a hell of a lot more and seen where it's taken them. But I think there's some interesting parallels that might come out of this. So do you want to let's I think the best place to start, I think, is always at the beginning. So do you want to just sort of take us back, not necessarily to your childhood, but where does this your love for tennis start? That would be a good place, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately started probably where a lot of people started. I imagine your journey was quite similar. Somebody rocked up to my primary school one day when I was 5 or something and went, "This is tennis." We had a little go and I went, "This is pretty okay. I could get on board with this." And I was, even from an early age, like my dad was very sporty. He played a lot of cricket, badminton, tennis, all sorts of things, so football. So, we were always playing around with bats and balls and stuff in the garden. So it kind of went from there, really. It sat and fell nicely at the right time. And I started going to a few little lessons after school, and then gradually got a bit bigger and a bit better and got invited to go to a different session, which was, for better kids, or there for those who are listening, because I was never that great. And like every kid at that age, I kind of thought, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my career. I'm going to be the next professional player. And I got to about 12, 13 maybe, and I went, I'm not going to be a professional tennis player. This is ridiculous. Because, for those who aren't aware, it's a frighteningly difficult world to break into. The top 100 players in the world are the ones who make a little bit of money, a profit. And I think there's on average one change in the top 100 every year.
Yeah, it's once you're in, and so, getting in is hard.
One new player breaks into the top 100 every year and one drops out. So making a living out of tennis is phenomenally difficult. And it was around that kind of time that I started to do a little bit of assisting and helping my coach deliver some, lessons for little teeny tiny people. I kind of realized I got more satisfaction from helping others than I did from performing myself. And it was this sort of a revelation, because at 12, 13 years old, it's a bit young to be having revelations about stuff. But it did make me kind of go, okay, maybe this is how I can do this. Maybe this is how I can scratch that itch. But actually, it's more fun seeing other people get better than it is getting better myself. And now I look back at 39 or however old I am.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, no, let's not, exactly. There's a sort of common thread that runs through it. And I go, well, actually, everything I do and everything I've done has been actually about helping other people. So even like one of my hobbies is photography. Well, actually, what I find now is that I do photography training and I do photography talks for camera clubs and universities. And again, that comes back, that's still helping other people get better at photography. So it doesn't seem to matter which avenue I find myself going down. It's always about helping other people get better, more so than getting better myself. So that's where I've sort of arrived at with what I do today.
I think there's some really interesting parallels there, because I started playing, I didn't have that primary school introduction other than our hour on our bikes every day in the playground kind of thing when I was at school in the 70s. That's why I said we shouldn't go there. But yeah, I mean, I started kind of maybe 10 or 11. But my journey into coaching was at a very similar age. Sort of 12, 13, I was assisting my coach and went through very much the same gamut of emotions and realization that actually I'm never going to be a tennis player. I'll be able to play tennis, but I'll never be able to call myself a tennis player. and there's a big difference. I'm realizing that with my golf now. I'm not a golfer, but I can play golf. And that path then kind of takes you to some interesting places. I mean, I coached full time for Lord knows how long, 23 odd years or whatever it was, and was in and around the game and worked for the LTA in a different capacity to you, but obviously was there when Jane Stewart was still around, and I had her on this podcast not that long ago. So how when you decided, or was there a moment in which you went, oh, okay, well, coaching is something I enjoy, so how do I do this as a career? Or was there stepping stones in between?
No, do you know what? I just kind of fell into it, to be perfectly honest. Although I knew I enjoyed doing it, and I was doing it a little bit, I was still at that time sort of considering arty-farty, creative-y as well. And I was sort of considering a career in going like design, graphic design, that kind of thing. And it was purely through a chance meeting with well, not chance meeting, but a meeting with somebody you probably know very well, Christine Rivers.
Yes.
Yes, you know Chris. So I was just a member of a tiny little village tennis club, and I went to meet her to kind of go, look, I want to do something a little bit more at this tennis club, but it needs a bit of help. What can what can we do? And she said, yeah, that's great. Never mind that. We've got this new indoor tennis centre opening in Gloucester in a couple of months' time. I want you there to be like coaching on the opening night. I was like, yeah, but that thing I was talking about with the club, she went, yeah, we'll worry about that later. Can you be there on, I can't remember, I think it was the 13th of January, like 2001-ish, like that maybe. It was in that kind of ballpark. So I was like, oh, well, yes, okay, I can do that. And then it just sort of went from there, really. And it just sort of, it grew, and that became a regular Saturday morning. And then from there, it became a regular 7 days a week, as these things.
Well, yeah, as they do. It kind of goes from a couple of hours to having a couple of hours free, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it was. And that was it. So I was at that tennis centre for 5 years, 6 years. When did I leave there? Yeah, sort of 5 or 6 years, along with doing work for the county association, doing county performance squads and doing other club stuff and fun days, all the usual stuff that coaches do when they're sort of kind of going, okay, this is a career now, is it? Okay. So much to my university lecturer's disgust, I spent far more time on a tennis court than I did in the lecture hall. But did come out of it with a degree in the end, so that was cool. And then I've used it 3 times since, so perfect.
On CVs.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
And so what was your degree in? Was it
graphic design?
Graphic design.
Yeah, it was graphic design. Yeah, highly relevant.
Yeah, so
good for making flyers for the tennis club.
Yeah, and obviously that's where your love of photography comes.
Yeah, well,
comes
absolutely.
From,
yeah,
it links in as
yeah,
well. But
it does. Yeah, it ties in. It sort of, again, I used the term earlier on. It scratches that creative itch in that I still get to do stuff. And on one of my Instagram profiles, I don't really like the term, but I'm sort of a digital artist because I do a lot of sort of photography collage kind of work, and I sell a few prints and stuff just for a bit of a. If there is such a thing as a side hustle for me, that's it, because I have many side hustles.
So where did because what I wanted to really explore, I think, is at some point along this journey, and I'm very aware it could be quite reasonably recent, or and I'd be curious to know when this itch needed scratching. You got, and I could be making a presumption here, but you got quite interested in how people tick, I guess,
Yeah.
and was that through wanting to get the best out of your athletes, researching performance habits and behaviors and the way that people form those habits, etc.? Or did you sort of fall into that as well? Because for me, you're someone who has if not a depth, certainly a breadth of knowledge around maybe a depth as well around how the mind works. And what came first, I suppose? Was it because of the sport, or did you apply it to sport because you picked up the knowledge?
No, I think it was bred through being involved in that world, and the more sort of my career went through, and the more I started working with better players in kind of, I guess, higher pressure environments, it kind of made me go, there's something else here. Because everyone, in those environments, we see it even in professional sports, everyone at that level can hit a good tennis ball.
Yeah.
Everybody in the Premiership is a good footballer.
Yeah.
As much as we take them, that player's rubbish, blah. It's like, no, they're not. They're a full-time professional footballer for a Premier Division club or whatever.
There's a reason for that.
Exactly. They don't just get there by accident. They don't just fall into that, they don't fall from Sunday League to Premiership like overnight. So they're all really good. So I kind of started to go, well, why are some of them just better? And yes, there may be technical or tactical bits and pieces that make a difference, but what's the real difference maker in those people? Why are they the ones that why do they keep winning, basically, was what it comes to. Why do they, no matter what you throw at them, find a way to not only survive but thrive? And that's where that kind of interest came from, I guess, because and early on in my career, a lot of the coaches I saw and was experiencing were quite directive.
Yeah.
You need to go and do X to get Y. So I naturally kind of followed that path because, we're all a product of our environment. So that was the environment I was in. So that was the way I started working. And then I kind of met a few different people along the journey who were very much the opposite end of the spectrum. If we think of coaching as a spectrum from sort of directive at one end, telling, to kind of facilitating at the other end, which is kind of all about asking questions and helping athletes discover solutions to things. And it kind of, so there's a different way of doing this. So, okay, which is best? Because I think the thing ultimately it comes back to is I'm really curious about everything. I've definitely got some neurodiverse traits in that aspect. I'd love to know how things work, why they work, why does that happen? The other night we've got a new log burner, and I went down a rabbit hole the other night on YouTube of how do you build the perfect fire.
Yeah.
So now I know all about building fires from bottom up, from top down fires, the Scandinavian. So it's just this weird curiosity thing I have. I just love to know how things work.
I've done a lot of research on different axes and how to split wood effectively.
There you go.
So hours on YouTube.
There you go. So we're in a similar boat for sure.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, so how? Why do these people? Why do they get to perform under pressure? And if I'm working with an athlete and I'm always telling them what to do, specifically in tennis, because in tennis, I'm sure people are aware, as a coach, you're officially not allowed any input with your player whilst they're playing. So you're not allowed to coach from the sidelines. It's not like football or rugby where you can shout from the touchline and give instructions. That once they cross the white line, they're on their own.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, well, if I'm always telling them what to do in practice, what do they do when I can't tell them what to do in a match?
Fail.
And it really struck home for me when I was chatting with Nigel Redmond, who's former rugby coach, was with the England development squads and such like, and Worcester Warriors. And he said exactly that. If you want players to make good decisions under match pressure, why are you making decisions for them in easy training? I thought, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that sent me down this rabbit hole of going, okay, I need to understand, one, how we learn. Because if I can find a way of helping people learn that develops permanent behavior changes, because ultimately, that for me, that's what coaching is. Coaching is helping someone make a permanent change in their behavior.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's positive.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, that is the idea. So hopefully it's a positive change in their behavior, which is permanent and it's robust. In other words, it can be performed when you really need it. Because I think that's where a skill is important. The skill is when I really, really need this skill, whether it's a mental skill, a physical skill, a technical skill, can I deliver it when it really, really matters? And that's why when Roger Federer is serving 15-40 down, match points against, he can deliver the serve out wide that he needs. That's why when Tiger Woods was in his prime, when he was going down the 18th, one shot, all square, possibly going into a playoff for a major, he could pull a chip shot from the rough into the, within 2 feet of the pin. Okay, and it's that fascinates me. It's that idea of when it really, really matters, how do we deliver those skills and why?
And I think, you made an interesting point about easy practice versus pressured performance. And the danger of being directive is it makes the practice easy. It makes the training easy. And I think that's something I learned as well, is that when you put certainly kids into an environment where you allow them to think for themselves, two things happen. One, it's very different to the environment they're usually in, say at school, where it is quite dictatorial, is directive. And as soon as you say to them, look, you have the answers, you've just got to work out what the right questions are, they thrive. And I always remember working with a group of, I think they were at Red Bull, so under 8, and it was a little performance squad, development squad, whatever you want to call it, all sort of 5 to 7 years old. Indoors, badminton nets, proper mini tennis, foam balls. You know, we didn't even have the outdoor balls. You know, and all I did was walk along. If you imagine the net between them, and I had some hoops, and I put the hoops down one pace away either side of the net. Okay, and I just said to them, right, pause for a moment. If any of you can land the ball in the hoop on the first bounce, and your player on the other side doesn't get it, you win the game. And you could see them, they're all loading these balls with huge amounts of topspin. The ball's going miles over the net, it's nice and safe. And I remember this one kid, and I could see him just looking at the way everybody, and he just stopped and he's looking around, and suddenly he went, and I'm doing this visually, and I'm aware no one's going to watch this, but he suddenly took the ball, you know, took his racket from neck down to sort of ankles in a sort of J shape, you know, a nice slice. We would appreciate a nice deep cutting slice. And he tried it, and it landed in the hoop, and he won the game. And then suddenly all the kids started looking at Joseph. I remember it was and going, "How did you do that?" And so he went over to the kid next to him and said, "I'll start here and do that." And they started teaching each other, and they started working with each other. And before you know it, it was like game points rather than points within the game, because they were all hitting the perfect drop shot. I didn't show them that technique. I didn't help them develop that skill. I just laid down the challenge and let them work it out. And because I'd not told them what to do, and it was hilarious, because the next time we played a match at another club, there were a number of drop shot points that were won. It was incredible. But I guess what I'm getting to is that I guess that's an example of the difference between, if I told them how to do it, I would have told that one player how to do it. And the difference is that they all, I think people, you talked right at the beginning about people like help, you know, you like helping people. I think everybody likes helping each other. And if you create an environment where that happens, people thrive.
Yeah, 100%. And the key word you used there was environment, because I think we said it earlier on. We're all a product of our environment. We're all a product of the people we spend the most time with. We're all a product of the environments in which we operate. And so if we can create environments where it's okay to share and it's okay to learn. And I know you talked a lot in your conversation with Jane. It's okay to fail. This is really important. And again, and in sport and in business, you know, and I know you guys talked about it at length, so we won't cover it much again, but giving yourself or the people you're working with the freedom to fail, but fail with good intention.
Yes.
Is really important. And I think that's a really important distinction, is it's not okay just to screw up because you don't care, but it is okay to screw up with good intentions.
Deliberate
failure. A lot of work. I'm fascinated at the moment by leadership. And I'm writing a course on leadership at the moment and interviewing for the course, you know, a lot of people from military leadership, sports leadership, and things like that. And I think that's one of those principles that I keep coming back to, is going, yeah, as a leader, it's okay. You need to give your people freedom to fail, but fail with intent. They're failing because they're trying something that they've deliberately spent time considering, and not just because they're throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something might stick. Like that's a big difference when it comes to freedom to fail, but it's an important part of that environment for personal development.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and that's a definite rabbit hole we could go down that way, couldn't we, on the whole leadership thing. So when I heard you at a talk reasonably recently, and I think there are a couple of things in there that you talked about in terms of managing your mindset, and that difference between our sort of lizard brain, chimp behavior, and our ability to respond to situations. And I think I bring this up because you know, we're in a situation at the moment, you know, recording this in the second lockdown. I haven't banged on about lockdown very much in this podcast because there are lots of people doing podcasts around lockdown, and I don't need to add to it. But it's been fascinating as a sort of from a social observation perspective, watching how different people have responded or reacted to the situation that we've been in over the last several months. I'd be interested to pick your brains in terms of what your observations have been about how people have performed under pressure and in a different kind of environment that they're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I love the phrase you used there, which was responded or reacted, because psychologically, we tend to use those terms interchangeably. And yet psychologically, there's a huge difference between the two. So a reaction is very much emotionally led, spur of the moment, kind of just in the now. Whereas a response is, you would say that a response was more considered, more cognitive, more logical. You've had time. So the example I always use is road rage. Okay, so we've all been driving. We've had that kind of moment where somebody, usually an Audi or BMW driver, cuts you up.
You've just lost half your audience.
Yeah, sorry, Business Clubhouse listeners. Other brands are available to cut you up also. And they cut you up, and in the moment you are absolutely raging. You're effing and jeffing at the radio. You're shouting, swearing, cursing, and it's the adrenaline just suddenly snaps. And then you continue your drive home, and you get home, and you speak to your partner, friends, whoever, and you go, "Oh, you're not going to believe this. On the way home, this muppet in this X, Y, and Z car cut me up on the motorway. What a blah blah blah." And then the next morning, you get into the car and you drive to work, and you've forgotten all about it.
Yeah,
it's just not a thing, right? So you've gone from like incandescent rage to mildly peeved to it's just not a thing anymore. And you've done that over the course of like 10, 12, 24 hours, whatever it is. So we all have the ability to go from reacting to responding. It's innate. It's what we can do.
Yeah.
The difference is whether we choose to. And I think in situations like this, and when we're under pressure, because we're like, there's a really interesting, I don't want to go too neuroscience-y, but there's some really interesting research that when you ask a room of people, put your hand up if you think you're a logical person. 80%, 90%, 100% of the room will go, yeah, I'm a logical person. They go, okay, who thinks they make rational decisions? They go, yeah, of course I make rational decisions. Everyone puts their hand up. And you go, well, you're all wrong, because you are driven emotionally. So logic is what we use to justify decisions we made with emotion.
Yeah.
And then there's the neuroscience backs it up. Like, I don't want to go too into some of it, but effectively the bits of your brain that light up when you are thinking when you're emotional are so much more kind of, they take up so much greater mass in your brain than those that light up when you're being logical. Okay, so the difference, basically, the emotional center is more powerful. Which is probably the layman's term way of explaining it. It's a more powerful section of the brain than the logical one. So
it has to be to protect us.
That's exactly what it's for. It's exactly that. It's to keep us safe. So when you have those negative thoughts, when you have that imposter syndrome, when you have that kind of that feeling of butterflies that stems, it's like, that's good. That's your brain doing its job. It's just trying to keep you safe. What you then have to do is look at that and go, okay, my logical brain is going to override that, because actually, if I stand up, let's say I'd stand up and give this talk and it goes wrong, the world isn't going to end. Okay, my partner hopefully isn't going to leave me because I did such a terrible job of delivering a speech. So then you kind of start to rationalize it logically and go, okay, actually the worst that could happen is that the audience goes, he was a bit naff. So, okay. Maybe it was the wrong audience, maybe it was the wrong topic, whatever. So that you can then rationalize it afterwards. So our job is to go from react to respond as quickly as possible. Now, you're a golfer. On the golf course,
well, I'm somebody who plays golf. I wouldn't call myself a golfer.
Okay, good distinction. So as someone who plays golf, you hit a duff drive off the second tee. You probably, I don't know how far you drive, 250, 300 yards to go from reacting to responding. And that's the difference for me. That seems to be the big driver. The difference between the elite and the super elite is the speed at which they can choose to go from react to respond. Because if you get to your second shot and you're still in react mode, because you can't believe you spent all that money on lessons and you just sliced the drive into the trees.
You've been watching me.
Yeah. You sent me a video, right? Like, what a waste of time and effort and money. Why am I bothering? I could be doing something else.
Yeah.
And what happens with the next shot?
Same again. Or you try and fix something that's unfixable because it's already done.
Absolutely. So you then exert conscious control over an action that should be autonomous in your swing, or you're losing focus and the ball squirts off into the trees, and then the whole thing spirals. So the super elite can go, okay, that was crap. Park it, reset, and go again. And I think that's what we've seen people really find tricky during this sort of second lockdown period, especially, or even with the first one to an extent, there was no cutoff period.
Mm.
There was no 200-yard walk to the next shot to reframe my thoughts because it didn't have an end. And I didn't know when it was going to end. So because there was no finite point in which I could go, I just have to keep putting one foot in front of another until I get to X, it got really, really tricky for people. And this one's possibly been a little bit different because we've all been promised it'll end next week. And
there's
we'll
still a little bit of uncertainty.
Yes,
as to
there
how,
is. But
yeah.
I feel like it might be like the DFS sale where it ends on Friday and a new sale starts on Monday. But we'll wait and see. So I think that's one thing where people have struggled. I think the other thing is there's been a lot of weird pressure on people that they should be using this period to do something constructive. And I think the word should is very psychologically dangerous.
Could is a much better one.
Could is great. Could inspires kind of hope and possibility, but it also doesn't matter if it's not. Whereas should, Ash, you should be hitting the ball straight off the tee because you've invested all this time and money in having golf lessons and practice, etc. You should be doing it. You go, well, hang on, why should I? Like, there's 1,000,001 things that could happen. Like if the club face is 1 degree off, that's like a 30-foot difference in where the ball's going to land.
Yeah.
So I can't exert that fine motor. Phil Mickelson can't drive straight, and he's one of the best golfers in the world. So I think the idea of this, you should be using lockdown to educate yourself, to read a book a day, to do. It's like, no. Your job is to survive. Your job at the moment is to survive, and if you can thrive, and if you can find 10 minutes a day to meditate or 5 minutes a day to just sit and have a coffee and think about things that you're really grateful for, that's awesome. Like, that's a great effort. But yeah, I think the big one for me, again, it's that lack of knowing when it ends, because it makes it really hard to respond and not just keep reacting.
And I think just picking you up on your wording there, not in a negative way, but the word should creates emotional tension. Yeah. And it can lead to it can lead to a reaction because you've not delivered on that should. And I think that's the danger, isn't it? And yeah. Whereas could leads to a response where, well, I could have done that, but I chose not to. Whereas as soon as you're saying, I should have done that, oh, why didn't I do it? And it immediately is almost preconditioning what the either the response or the reaction is going to be at the end point. And I think that's quite a fascinating thing, actually, that you can actually pre-frame how somebody's going to respond by the way that you set it up in the first place.
100%. It comes back to the idea that as human beings, we think in words and pictures. And so you plant, it's like a seed. Once you plant it, it takes root and then it grows. So if you plant that word in your head, should, for example, it could be any word or phrase.
Yeah.
But if you plant it, it grows, it takes roots, it gets bigger and stronger. And over time, it kind of takes over. And so that then affects the way you feel, which affects the way you behave. It's this kind of ever running loop. Thoughts leads to feelings, leads to behaviors.
Yep.
The feelings are important because we know, like we said earlier, we're very emotional creatures. We operate on emotion first, logic later. So that kind of builds this feedback loop. And it's almost like, I think we talked about confirmation bias a little bit in the talk that I did the other week, which is where you keep looking for evidence to prove that things you believe are true. And so it kind of feeds this confirmation bias loop where it's like, I thought a negative thing, felt bad, I behaved differently because I felt bad. See, I knew I was terrible. It just goes on and on and on around this circle. So in order to behave differently, we need to think differently, which means we need to recognize that seed before it gets planted and change it for a different one. And that's where this idea of kind of reframing your thoughts, and that's how you move from reacting to responding.
And I've seen it with a number of people over the last several months that, I laid out a challenge, I guess, with many people, which was, you've got an opportunity over the next, we all thought for some reason it was going to be 3 months first time round. So I think for some people there was this perceived endpoint. And we were quite careful to say, there is an opportunity here. And if you can, what can you do to improve yourself, improve your business so that when you leave lockdown, it's in a better place? But if you can't, that's also okay.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself under, ridiculous pressure. And I think, that whole confirmation bias piece as well is really important, because I see it all the time. I work with people, and many of my clients will almost tell themselves that whatever it is that they're about to do won't happen, because they've already told themselves it won't happen. And it comes back to, because the thing that you've maybe, I don't know if you've missed it or not, or we just didn't get into it, is the whole principle of the brain not seeing negatives.
Yeah.
So, we go back to the golf analogy. If you've got water in front of you and a flag, 130, 140 yards away, if you say don't hit it in the water, our brains haven't got time to deal with negatives. So the only picture you see is the ball going in the water.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in a little to unpick that a little bit for people. There's two really interesting things there. The first is that our brain is really good at catastrophizing. Mm-hmm. So it'll take a small thing and make it a really big thing. And again, it comes back to, it wants to keep us safe.
Yeah. That's a cat. It might be a saber-toothed tiger. Run.
We go out for a walk. You see a stick and your brain goes, snake.
Yeah.
And the logical part of your brain goes, no, it's a stick. We know what sticks look like. And then your body goes, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly drops. The second point which you made is fascinating. So it's not so much that the human brain doesn't recognize like the word don't. It's just that in order to deconstruct an idea, we first have to construct it. So in other words, to use your example, when you tell your brain, don't hit the ball in the water, in order to understand what not hitting it in the water looks like, it first has to picture what hitting it in the water does look like.
Yeah.
And so therefore, that's the thing it takes away from your statement.
Yes.
I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant. In order to not think of a pink elephant, the first thing you have to do is picture what a pink elephant looks like. So the first thing that happens is, oh, pink elephant pops into your head. So that's where that comes from. It's words and pictures. Because we think in words and pictures, when we tell ourselves not to do something, the first thing we have to picture is what doing that thing would look like.
And that's because, so I was going to just jump in quickly. No. Is that because, and I think I know the answer to this, that our ability to converse like this, articulate using verbal words and writing, developed after our ability to construct pictures in our head?
Yeah, I would imagine. I haven't looked into the evolutionary science of it, but I would imagine that's
the case, isn't it? Yeah.
It seems fairly logical, doesn't it? That it was we developed kind of communication and language patterns long before we decided that it was a good idea to write them down. Yeah. And before we started writing them down, we drew them.
Yes. So that's our first point of reference.
We started drawing a picture of a tiger on the wall, and in the cave, and when kids don't go near one of these.
Yeah.
Basically, that's probably where, again, it was an evolutionary safety thing. You look at all the pictures of things; they're either things that you could eat. You go back to
things that could eat you.
Exactly. You go back to like the cave paintings at Lascaux and stuff like that, and it's one of the earliest recorded human sort of drawings. It's like, yeah, they're things that are going to kill you or things that will keep you alive, because that was the main driver.
Yeah, survival. Yeah,
is survival. So yes, I would imagine that's exactly where that came from. But yeah, so going back to your golf analogy of don't hit it in the water, better to think, knock it pin high.
Yeah, hit it on the green. It's the same with tennis. Don't hit it in the net.
On the green. Yeah, bang, straight in the bottom of the net. So yeah, so I think if we can, or if I can, if I can help people just reframe things positively, it's a big start. And that doesn't mean that you have to be all tree hugging, hippie, any of that. It's not like hippy dippy drippy stuff.
No.
It's just about accepting the fact that the thought you had was negative and then reframing it and going, well, yeah, that could happen. Because I think it's important to accept and acknowledge the fact that if I do this piece of marketing, though, it's not going to work, is it, because X? Well, that could happen. But equally, the opposite could be true. And you've spent a lot of time thinking it through, and you've analyzed who your target market is, and you've worked out what their problems might be and where you could position a solution. And unless you do it, you won't know.
Never know.
And so it's a little bit like a cognitive behavioral therapy piece where you kind of go, well, if you didn't do it, what would happen? And you go, as the business owner, you go, well, nothing. You go, okay, cool. If you did do it and it failed, what? Nothing.
Nothing.
So by not doing it, and it failing, you're still in the same position.
But you've learned something.
Possibly you've learned something. If you've done it and it's failed, there is the opportunity to learn and grow and develop from it.
Yeah.
So not doing it in that situation is not an option, because not doing it, you don't get anywhere and you don't learn. Doing it and failing, you don't get anywhere, but you've got the opportunity to learn. Do it, it might work, in which case you develop either way. So yeah, I think there's that idea of kind of reframing those negative thoughts and just kind of going, yeah, it could go badly wrong, but what if it goes right? I think it just starts to shift that thinking towards doing something is doing. I always talk to people about done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Because
progress,
if you spend
not
ages,
perfection.
yeah, if you seek ages seeking for perfection, you'll never get a thing done. So just do it, get it out there, and like the conversation you had with Jane, just review it, reflect on it afterwards. And if it worked, reflect on it too, because we're terrible at reflecting on things that go really well. You probably found this in your time in sport. The first thing you do on a Monday morning after a defeat on Sunday is watch the game tape.
For a lot of those.
we need to work out why it went wrong.
Yes. What about when you win? Well, what did I do for it to go right? Yes.
Because we must have done some good stuff. So how can we do that again?
It's quite interesting, because when we have our meetings, whether it's mastermind, whether it's business clubhouse Zoom calls, whether it's catch-ups, even our team weekly meetings, I make everybody start with wins. And so we just go around the room and say, well, what have your wins been for the last week, 2 weeks, last time I saw you? And actually the way that kind of frames the rest of the conversation is huge, because you're starting on your starting point for the conversation is, we've had some successes.
Yeah.
And immediately it shifts the conversation to, oh, woe is me, to, wow, I did this, and how can I do it again?
Yeah.
And it changes everything.
Absolutely. It's a really good, I talked a lot with business owners about kind of having winning conversations, which is, I think, the last talk that you listened to that I gave. And it's a lot of that is about how you can use language to reframe either yours or other people's thoughts. So for example, if you say to me, I'd love to invest in your weight loss coaching program, but I just don't have time to do it. If my response back to you is, it's great that you'd love to invest, but it's a shame that you don't have time, where do you then start your next sentence from? I don't have time. Yeah, you're right. It's terrible that I don't have time.
Yeah, you're reinforcing it for me.
Absolutely. If I feed it back to you and go, I totally understand, time pressures are tough, but it's amazing that you really want to focus on becoming healthier and fitter. You start off and go, yeah, I really do want those things. And again, you can, so that that's influencing someone else, but you can kind of play those tricks on your own brain.
It's talking to people about. I remember a conversation not that long ago, and his default was, I can't do that, and you just add one word, yet, and it changed everything for him. There you go. Good. Okay. So. I've got this guy that I've been working with for a while, and one of the things that he always says to himself is, I can't do that. And we've got him to add one word, which is yet.
Yeah.
At the end of that sentence, and it has changed everything for him, because he's like, okay, well, I can't do that yet, so what do I need to do to be able to do it, etc., etc. And words are really, I know it's a conversation we could have for hours, but the script in your head and how you shape it and what you say to yourself is so powerful. And it's only something that I think it is everything. And it comes down to, coming full circle to earlier on in the conversation about what makes the difference between, elite and ultra elite athletes. There's 100 tennis players in the world, one in, one out. Fundamentally, there are a half dozen maybe that win regularly-ish at the very top end. They're the ones everybody aspires to be to. What's the difference? I suspect a large part of the difference is the story they tell themselves.
Yeah, I think 100%. And also the timing of the story. So I think, have you ever heard of the concept of mind blindness?
I haven't in those terms, but I might have in a different way. Go on.
Mind blindness effectively describes the effect of adrenaline. So adrenaline is really good because it keeps us safe, right? So adrenaline basically is a hormone which pushes all the blood to the extremities of the body so that we can run fast, fight hard, and get out of danger.
Yeah.
So when we start to feel stressed and anxious, the brain signals to go, this could be tricky. We need to be safe here. So it starts to dump adrenaline into the system. The more adrenaline that gets dumped into the system, the more your system works. The heart beats faster to pump more blood around the body so that your muscles are ready to fight, flight, and whatever. But the downside of that is it forces the blood away from the bits of the brain that are really good at thinking. So up to I think it's about 130 beats per minute. When your heart rate gets there through adrenaline alone, it shuts down 70% of the thinking bit of your brain. If it carries on and gets to like 180 beats per minute, it shuts down 97% of the thinking bit of your brain.
Wow.
When you say, oh, he makes really stupid decisions under pressure, like, yeah, like it's a physiological response.
You don't have any other option, really.
You can't make anything other than daft decisions because you've got nothing in here to think with.
And it's not daft decisions, it's simple decisions.
Or simple, any decisions.
Binary, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The decisions to other people who are using logic, they go, well, that doesn't make sense. It's like, well, no, he can't because he hasn't got any thinking bits of his brain operating to do it with because, they're so full of adrenaline. So I think the big difference there, that's why we talk about players choking. There are lots of reasons why people choke, but that's part of that process. I think, again, the sooner we can recognize that the seed that was planted wasn't helpful and it's actually going to cause a negative emotional response. Sorry, that's not fair. The word negative emotion is not right because emotions are emotions. They're not negative or positive. They're just there.
Just how you,
that's an unfair statement for me. They are a fundamental part of being human. It's the behavior that follows that can become negative, and negative by it takes you where you don't want to go.
It's how you choose to apply the emotion to the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good way of putting it. So the sooner you can recognize that thought could lead to a negative behavior, the sooner you can change it, and the sooner you can get back on the path that's going to lead you to those positive outcomes, whether that's sport, whether that's in business, in personal life, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few situations or people's behaviors where somebody has genuinely set out to get you. There's a lot. There are a lot of people going, this virus has completely, changed my life, and why did it happen to me, and all the rest of it. Well, the virus didn't go, ooh, there's Ash Smith. Let's see how I can wreck his life. It's just there. It's about how, and I appreciate it's difficult, and the same thing applies to lots and lots of situations in business. Whether it's losing a client or whatever. People generally are not malicious.
Yeah.
Generally it's either an economic or an personal emotional decision that's driving the situation. And it's rare, actually, I'd like to think, that people, put somebody else's situation first and go, well, how can I go out to hurt them? Unless they're a true psychopath. I think genuinely that doesn't happen. So stuff rarely happens to us. Stuff happens. We choose to perceive it as being applied to us, and then that affects our ability to respond, and therefore we react instead, and that reaction can stay with us for a long time. It can be a hell of a long walk to the next shot.
100%. And again, it comes down, you've used the word choice a lot, and I think that's great. And I used to talk when I was working with kind of athletes at the professional level, is that you'd always hear athletes talk about the sacrifices they made to get to the top of the game.
They chose.
Exactly. I sacrificed going to the party. I sacrificed Christmas dinner to train. It's like, no, you chose those things.
Yeah, you could have chosen not to.
You made a decision. You got on the treadmill. You could have chosen to get off again.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important in that sense. So you can choose whether you keep feeding that reactive thought, you keep therefore feeding that negative feeling, which leads to more negative behaviors, or you can try and find a way to choose not to. And the very first thing is just being aware of it and accepting it.
Awareness is everything. Without the awareness, it's impossible to make change.
Absolutely. One of the big things with people who stop smoking is just being aware of when you're picking up the cigarette packet. can actually make you change your behavior.
Yeah, because then it becomes a choice rather than a trigger starting a habit loop.
Absolutely. So just being aware of those things first can be, it's a huge first step. And then once you're aware, you can become accepting. And once you're accepting, you can start reframing. But you have to go through that process. You can't just, people go, I've tried reframing my thoughts, it doesn't work. It's like, okay, let's reframe that.
Yeah.
And then we can get lost. And then we can go back to the beginning. We'll get you a different map. We'll get you a new sat nav and we'll go back to the beginning again. So yeah, that's always, but yeah, it's not easy. It's like anything, it's a skill. People forget that mental skills are skills.
You can't practice
like all
them.
skills, they need to be practiced and they need to be practiced in context.
Yeah.
And if you practice them out of context, the transfer is tricky. And if you don't practice them, they don't get better. It's not just something you're innate. Oh, he's so mentally tough. He was born mentally tough. No, he wasn't. Or she wasn't.
Might have been in an environment that created mental toughness.
100%. And people talk like resilience is a big deal at the moment. And I'm guilty of this. I talk to companies about being more resilient organizationally or individually. And we talk about it like it's this magical concept. And then you look at it at its heart and you go, everyone is resilient. Yeah. Everyone has shown some level of resilience to come back and do this again. Or something again. Something has gone wrong for just about everybody and they've overcome it and they've carried on. And you might not recognize that as resilience, but it all shapes to building your own level of resilience. Now, there are ways and there are things we can do to help improve that and make you even more resilient, but it's not like this magical unicorn that only certain people get to ride. Like, everyone has a level of resilience through, like you said, your environment, your experiences, the things you've done, the people you've met, the things you've seen.
And often what happens, I think, I don't know, but I think people just take their level of resilience for granted. And it's very, they forget that they have overcome things. They forget that their life has been a journey of hurdles and not flat. But it's too easy to look at other people and go, oh, they've been through this, they've been through that, and they're stronger than I am, etc. And you forget your own. Because I think that's also a natural thing to do is to compare upwards.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
A really simple thing to do.
And again, we can talk about this phrase, comparison to other people is always dangerous. And again, it's very tricky. So-and-so's doing so well in their career. They must be a better person than me. No. So it doesn't make them a better person. They might be a better business person than you. They might have more experience of doing the right things in the right places, or they might have more help than you, or
more practice, more failure.
More practice, exactly. That's it. Their journey is different. And again, it sounds a little bit hippie, I know, but that's the key. It's the stage of the journey that you are on. And as long as you're very, very clear on where you want to go, you've got that vision, you've got that reason for doing it, which is kind of your why. What's my motivation? Why am I trying to get to the end of this, whatever the end of my journey is? And then the awareness along the way to kind of go, when do I need to ask for help? When do I need to go and see the business clubhouse and kind of go, okay, guys, actually, I'm a bit stuck here. Give me some steer. When do I draw on my support network?
Yeah.
Because no individual athlete gets to the top on their own.
No.
It's an individual sport, but there's probably 20 people who are involved at any one time in getting that athlete to the top step of the podium. So yeah, I think comparison to others can be very dangerous for us too. Make sure you focus on your own journey, on your own map, and that you bring in the support you need to try and get you to where you want to go.
One of my favorite ever sayings is comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes. Very nice.
Very nice. Actually, I think we could talk all day, mate.
We easily could.
All sorts of stuff.
We might have to come back and do this again another time.
Do it again over a beer, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Which would be really nice. If people want to reach out to you, mate, and pick your brain, how? What's the easiest way?
You can, best thing to do, drop me a message to ash@pitchtoinspire.co.uk. So pitchtoinspire.co.uk. Yeah, drop me a message. The big things, that I'm sort of focusing on the moment, like I said, leadership is one. Conversations is another. So how to have, and again, those two things go hand in hand, right? Great leaders are able to have great conversations because that's, again, great leaders are coaches. So if that's something you want to have a chat about and explore, let me know. And obviously, mental strength, mental skills, again, all those things kind of go hand in hand, really. It's all about kind of being a more rounded person. So yeah, ash@pitchtoinspire.co.uk. Drop me a message. Let's have a chat.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on, giving up your time, sharing your knowledge. I love these conversations. I think there's always a little knowledge bomb, as you put it, that somebody hopefully will pick out of it, and it'll be of use to them. And that's what it's all about.
You're most welcome. It's been good fun.
Cheers, buddy.
No worries. Speak soon.